Redemption. Chapter 1. The Invitation. Mike Jones stood at the edge of his penthouse balcony, the cityscape glittering beneath him like a circuit board. It was ironic, really. He had once been king of a high school hallway, feared and revered in equal measure. Now he ruled boardrooms and innovation labs, his name etched in tech journals and business magazines. Yet tonight, with an alumni invitation trembling in his hand, he felt 15 again. Small, scared, ashamed. The card was thick with embossed lettering. Riverdale High, Class of 2015 Alumni Masquerade Ball. Elegant, formal, final. He knew she would be there. Sue McMillan. The girl he'd once called Mouse McMillan, whose books he'd knocked from her hands, whose voice he'd mocked with cruel precision. The girl with eyes too large for her face and brilliance too big for their small town. The girl who, in silence, had endured him. And the woman who, unbeknownst to her, had saved his life. Mike set the card down and opened the browser on his phone. Sue's name came up instantly. Dr. Susan McMillan, Chief Pediatric Surgeon, Children's Hope Hospital. Her smile in the photo was tight, professional. But her eyes? Still the same. Clear. Quiet. Watching everything. She had no idea that the anonymous $10 million donation to build her surgical wing had come from the same man who once shoved her into lockers. Until now. He typed a message, paused, deleted it, typed again. Dear Dr. McMillan, Sue. I hope this message finds you well. I've spent the past 10 years thinking about what I did and who I was. There's no excuse, but I'd like a chance to say it to your face. If you're willing, I'd be honored if you would join me at the Alumni Masquerade Ball. There's more I want to share. No strings. Just a chance to start making things right. Mike. Chapter 2. The Masked Agreement. Sue McMillan stared at her phone as if it had grown teeth. The name blinking on the screen made her stomach clench. Mike Jones. 10 years ago, that name had meant sneers, whispered laughter, the sharp crack of textbooks hitting the floor. Now it was stitched into the seams of Forbes articles, investor podcasts, and tech expos. The golden boy of Silicon Valley. And he wanted to see her? She reread the message 3 times. It wasn't polished or manipulative. It was raw, and that unsettled her even more than if he'd tried to charm her. She walked to the window of her apartment, the city skyline casting shadows across her walls. The world had changed since high school. So had she. The shy, studious girl with second-hand clothes and a mouthful of braces had grown into a woman who cut into children's hearts and stitched them back stronger. But her scars? Some ran deeper than any scalpel could reach. She picked up her phone and typed slowly. Mike, I don't know what to say. Part of me wants to delete this and forget it ever came. But another part, the part that never got closure, wants to hear what you have to say. I'll go to the ball with you. On one condition, I'll be wearing a masquerade mask. I'll choose when and if to take it off. You may not recognize me right away. That's the point. I want you to see me for who I am now, not just who I used to be. Sue. She hit send and immediately felt her heartbeat quicken. It was a strange sort of power, deciding how and when to reveal yourself. In surgery, she held a child's life in her hands. In that mask, she'd hold her past in hers. She didn't know if Mike deserved forgiveness. But he'd get a chance to earn it. He hit send before he could change his mind. Chapter 3. The Locker Incident. Riverdale High, Spring 2015. The hallways always smelled like a mixture of floor wax, overcooked cafeteria pizza, and anxiety. Sue McMillan knew the timing of the bell schedule down to the second. She navigated her day like someone crossing a minefield, efficient, precise, invisible. Until she wasn't. It started the moment she turned the corner by the science wing. She heard the low thrum of their voices first, Mike Jones and his pack of football friends. Laughter like a slow-moving storm, getting closer. She gripped her books tighter, eyes forward. Keep walking. Keep breathing. Hey, Mouse. Her heart sank. She hated that name. Mouse. Small. Skittish. Weak. He hadn't even made it up himself. One of his friends had called her that in freshman year, and Mike had latched onto it like it was a brand. And like everything Mike Jones touched, it became gospel. He stood directly in front of her now, tall and golden and grinning like he owned the school. And in a way he did. Quarterback. Class clown. The guy teachers gave too many second chances. The guy girls fawned over. The guy who could ruin someone's day with one well-timed smirk. Got a hot date with the library? He asked, eyes flicking to her chest where her books were clutched tight. Before she could respond, he slapped the top book, her well-worn copy of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and the stack exploded in her arms. Papers fluttered everywhere. The air suddenly filled with their wings. A chorus of laughter erupted. She dropped to her knees instantly, scooping up pages, pretending her face wasn't burning, pretending her hands weren't shaking. But then, silence. When she looked up, Mike was just standing there, not laughing, watching her. And something flickered across his face. Not amusement, not triumph. Confusion, maybe, or shame. The hallway's mood had shifted. The laughter died too fast. His friends exchanged glances, unsure. Sue rose slowly, her books clutched to her chest once more. She was trembling, but her voice didn't reflect it. You know, Mike, she said, locking eyes with him. Some people peak in high school. I hope this isn't your peak. It was the first time she ever spoke back. And Mike didn't answer. His smirk faded. His brow creased. For a second, he looked like a kid who just got caught breaking something he couldn't fix. She turned and walked away. Mike didn't chase her. He didn't laugh. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes following her like a shadow. That night, Sue cried in her bedroom, not because she was humiliated, but because she finally realized something worse. She wasn't invisible. She had never been invisible. He saw her. He just chose cruelty over kindness. She decided then that the next time someone tried to make her feel small, they'd have to work a lot harder. Chapter 4. Cracks in the Crown. Riverdale High, 2 weeks before graduation. Mike Jones sat in the far back corner of Mr. Lawton's English classroom, where the fluorescent lights buzzed like a fly that wouldn't die. His desk was littered with a chewed-up pen, a crumpled gum wrapper, and a half-finished practice test. Outside the window, spring had officially thawed Riverdale. Trees bloomed, seniors daydreamed, and final grades hovered in limbo. Mike's grade didn't matter. He already knew he'd scrape by. Football had seen to that. Coaches had leaned on teachers. Teachers leaned on the idea that he had potential. His charm had done the rest. But today, the usual swagger felt heavy. Mr. Lawton paced the front of the classroom, reciting the final essay prompt. Who are you when no one's looking? The room fell into a hush, punctuated only by the sound of pencils scratching. Except for Mike's. His page remained blank. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, letting his gaze wander. His friends Bryce, Leon, and Travis were clustered at the front, faking effort. No doubt planning some senior prank or party later. Across the room, a few girls whispered to each other and giggled. Someone passed a note. Then his eyes landed on her. Sue McMillan. 2 rows up. 3rd seat from the window. Always the same seat. Always the same expression, focused, serious, like the rest of them didn't exist. Her pencil moved with quick, efficient strokes, like she already knew what she wanted to say. She was never loud, never flinched, never looked anyone in the eye unless she meant to. He remembered the locker incident vividly. He hadn't expected her to say anything. She never had before. "I hope this isn't your peak." The words landed like a slap, but not the kind that leaves bruises. The kind that leaves echoes. He hadn't told anyone about the weird tightness in his chest that day, or how he couldn't meet his own eyes in the mirror after. Something about the way she looked at him, with disappointment, not fear, had messed him up more than any detention ever could. And now here she was again, writing like her life depended on it. Calm, driven, unbothered. "Who are you when no one's looking?" Mike looked down at the blank page. The pen felt heavier in his hand than it should have. He scribbled a few words. Quarterback. Popular. Winner. He stared at them. They looked stupid. Hollow. He scratched them out. Then he tried again. Leader. Confident. Charming. He crossed that out too. He ran a hand over his face and exhaled slowly, glancing again at Sue. What was she writing? What did someone like her see when she looked inward? He suddenly wanted to know. He looked back at his paper and finally wrote a sentence that felt real. "I'm not sure who I am without the audience." His heart pounded. That was it. That was the truth he'd never said out loud. Without the team, the cheers, the laughs, the fake smiles, what was left? He sat back, staring at the words. Then he tore the page out, crumpled it, and shoved it deep into his backpack. No way was he turning that in. But for the first time, he didn't feel like the king of the school. He felt like a boy trying on a crown that didn't quite fit. Chapter 5. The Mask She Wore. Present day, 2 days before the ball. The scent of jasmine and old paper filled Sue McMillan's apartment as she stood before her full-length mirror, a delicate black and silver masquerade mask in her hands. It was made of lace and fine velvet, its edges glittering softly beneath the warm light. She had ordered it weeks ago, long before Mike's message ever arrived. She didn't know why she had kept it. Maybe part of her had always known this moment would come. The invitation to the alumni ball had sat unopened on her coffee table for days. She wasn't one for nostalgia. Too many ghosts lived in the halls of Riverdale High, ghosts in varsity jackets, ghosts with sharp smiles, ghosts that used to chant her nickname like it was a curse. But Mike's message had changed something. His words hadn't been slick. They hadn't been rehearsed. There was a weight to them. Regret, maybe. Or desperation. "I want to talk. Not to the girl I used to tease. To the woman you've become. If you'll let me." It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't nothing. Sue turned her attention back to the mirror. She lifted the mask and slowly placed it against her face. The transformation was immediate. Her soft brown eyes suddenly seemed sharper, darker. There was mystery in her reflection. Power. This mask wasn't about hiding. It was about choosing how and when she would be seen. She had learned, over the years, how control could be healing. In the operating room, she was control incarnate, calm hands, clear mind, beating hearts placed back into tiny chests. Outside that room, she was still learning how to protect the pieces of herself that hadn't fully healed. And Mike Jones? He had been one of the wounds that never quite closed. She sat down at her vanity and ran her fingers over the edge of a photograph tucked into the frame, a faded image of her high school self, braces and all, holding a third-place science fair trophy. Her father had taken the photo before leaving for his second job that night. "That's my girl," he had said proudly. "One day, they'll all wish they'd been kinder." He died 3 years later. Never saw her graduate with honors. Never saw her in scrubs. Never saw her become a name in the medical journals. But he'd been right about one thing. She'd grown into someone they couldn't ignore. She set the photo down and turned back to her laptop. Mike's message was still open. Her reply had been brief, calculated. She told him about the mask. Told him she wanted to choose if and when he'd recognize her. He hadn't pushed back. Fair enough, he wrote. I just want to see you. However you'll let me. She didn't know what that meant. Didn't know what he meant. But curiosity, like a whisper in the dark, had taken root in her. What if he really had changed? What if the boy who broke her had become a man worth knowing? What if he hadn't? She slid the mask back into its velvet pouch and stood up, her reflection still watching her. For the first time in years, she felt that flutter in her chest, not fear, but anticipation. She was going to the ball. And this time, she wouldn't be the quiet girl pressed against the lockers. She'd be the woman in the mask. Chapter 6. The Measure of a Man. Present day, 2 days before the ball. Mike Jones had never felt out of place in his own house until tonight. The downtown penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek, impersonal decor, usually buzzed with energy. Meetings, phone calls, strategies. But now it felt still, heavy, like it was waiting for something to happen. He stood at the kitchen island, nursing a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. The tuxedo laid out across the back of a leather chair mocked him with its quiet elegance. Perfectly tailored, crisp, commanding. A costume. He didn't feel like the man it was made for. He should have been excited. He was about to be the keynote speaker at Riverdale High's 10-year reunion, a hometown success story, the local paper called him. Mike Jones, boy from nowhere turned Silicon Valley phenom. Tech CEO. Investor. Reformed bad boy. He hated that headline. No one asked what it cost to change. They only cared about the transformation once it looked good in photos. His eyes drifted to the envelope on the counter, the reunion invite, with Sue McMillan's name etched in tiny cursive on the RSVP list. He knew it by heart. He'd read it too many times. She was coming. Wearing a mask. It was her one condition. He hadn't known what to make of it at first. But the more he thought about it, the more he respected it. She was taking the power into her own hands. On her terms. Not his. Not the world's. It was something she should have had all along. He opened his laptop and pulled up a browser tab, one he'd kept open for weeks now. A live feed of McMillan Children's Hospital's homepage. A bright banner at the top read, "Thanks to our anonymous benefactor, our cardiac wing is now open." He'd never signed his name to that donation. He didn't want credit. Not for that. That was for her. For the little girl with a third-place science trophy and too much fire in her eyes to ever stay broken. She didn't owe him anything. But maybe he owed her this, his silence, his humility, his support. His phone buzzed. Bryce. Big night, huh? Ready to be King Mike again? Mike stared at the message. He used to laugh at that nickname. King Mike. Golden boy. Untouchable. But now, he felt more like a man trying to earn his crown this time, for the right reasons. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the window, the city sprawling below him like a million untold stories. Somewhere out there, Sue was preparing, too. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she was angry. Maybe she didn't even believe in redemption. He didn't blame her if she didn't. He reached for the whiskey, then stopped. He needed his head clear. This night mattered. Not for his image. Not for nostalgia. For truth. For her. For the version of himself he wanted to finally meet. Chapter 7. The Night of the Ball. Riverdale Grand Hall, evening. The chandeliers shimmered like frozen stardust above a sea of masked faces, each one cloaked in elegance and memory. The Riverdale Grand Hall had never looked so opulent. Black and gold drapery cascaded from the ceilings, and soft jazz curled through the air like smoke. Beneath it all, laughter and clinking glasses wove the soundtrack of nostalgia. Mike Jones adjusted his cufflinks, the tuxedo hugging his frame like it belonged. On the outside, he was every bit the man magazines adored, confident, polished, magnetic. But inside, he was searching for her. He scanned the crowd, his heartbeat a steady thump of nerves and questions. Would he know her? Would she want him to? His mind reeled back to the last time he saw her face to face, no mask, no armor, just her and that devastating calm she wore like a second skin. The girl who had shattered his illusion with one quiet sentence in the middle of a crowded hallway. I hope this isn't your peak. It wasn't. God, he hoped it wasn't. He took a glass of sparkling cider from a passing tray. He'd sworn off alcohol for the night. He needed his senses, needed every edge he could find. Because somewhere among the masquerade masks and old classmates pretending they hadn't aged was the woman who'd haunted his past and inspired his future. Sue. Across the room, in the archway just beyond the dance floor, she arrived. Her black gown flowed like ink across the marble. Elegant, timeless. Her mask was delicate but sharp, silver threads framing her eyes like frost. Her presence was quiet, but it rippled. He felt it. People noticed her without even realizing it. That was always her magic. Sue McMillan didn't need to raise her voice to take up space. Mike's breath caught as their eyes met. He didn't know how he knew it was her. He just did. It wasn't the mask. It wasn't even her posture. It was the storm behind her gaze. Familiar. Controlled. Watching everything. He took a slow step forward. She didn't move. It was like time pressed pause on the evening, holding them in a bubble of music and silence. Around them, people danced, laughed, drank. But Mike saw only her. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. He didn't smile. He just looked. Then finally, softly, hi. Sue tilted her head slightly, voice cool but steady. So you do recognize me? I wasn't sure I would, he admitted. But I was hoping I would. A beat passed. You look different, she said. Her tone wasn't cruel, just observational. Less golden. He gave a small smile. I've been trying to earn that. They stood in silence again, the air thick with the weight of unspoken things. Then, gently, Mike offered his hand. Would you dance with me? She hesitated. Her eyes searched his face, testing for sincerity, weakness, cracks. And she found them. He let her. No charm, no games. Just the man who had once failed her. And the man who wanted to be better now. Just one, she said, placing her hand in his. As they stepped onto the dance floor, he held her lightly, reverently. Not possessive, not performative, just present. And she allowed herself to be led not because she was weak, but because for the first time, she wanted to see where he might take her. The music swelled. Around them, the past and the present collided like breath and flame. And for a few minutes, Mike Jones and Sue McMillan moved as though time had never hurt them. As though forgiveness might just be possible. Chapter 8. Unmasking the Truth. Later that night, balcony overlooking the city. The dance had ended, but the echo of it lingered in Sue's chest like a second heartbeat. She stepped onto the balcony for air, the cool night wrapping around her bare shoulders. Her mask still rested delicately on her face, but she could feel the strain beneath it, the battle between past pain and present curiosity. She needed space. She needed answers. She needed to understand how Mike Jones, the boy who once weaponized his charm, could now hold her with such care and say so little, yet mean so much. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn around. "I didn't think you'd follow," she said softly. "I almost didn't," Mike replied, his voice rougher now, stripped of the confidence he wore like armor. "But I didn't want to leave without saying something." Sue took a steadying breath. "Go ahead." He joined her at the railing, but kept a respectful distance. Below them, the city pulsed lights, traffic, life. They both watched it for a moment, like two people sharing a dream they'd never quite belonged to. "I don't know how to start," Mike said. "Everything I practiced in my head sounds like a speech." "No speeches," she said quietly. "Just the truth." He nodded, his fingers gripping the edge of the balcony. "I've been thinking about this night for 10 years. Not just tonight, the reunion. This. Us. Talking." Sue finally turned to him, the silver threads of her mask catching the moonlight. "Why me?" "Because I owe you," he said. "Because I never forgot what I did. And because you were always more than what I saw back then." She studied him. "Do you know why I wore the mask?" Mike met her eyes. "To protect yourself." "Yes, and to choose how I'm seen. I never had that in high school." Her voice cracked slightly, the vulnerability slipping through. "Back then, I was just a joke with a brain and a lunch tray." "I know," Mike said, his throat tight. "I saw it happen. I helped it happen." And then, after a moment, the hospital. Sue blinked. "What about it?" "I made a donation. Anonymously. 2 years ago. When I found out you were the head of the pediatric cardiac team, He stopped himself, choosing his words carefully. "I wasn't trying to impress you. I saw what you were doing, who you'd become. And I wanted to be part of something good in your world, even from the background." Sue stared at him, breath frozen. "You funded the new cardiac wing?" He nodded. "Part of it, yeah. I knew they'd never name it after me. Didn't want them to. I just wanted to help." Silence stretched between them, electric and fragile. For a long time, Sue didn't speak. Then she reached up slowly and, with trembling fingers, removed her mask. Mike held his breath. She wasn't hiding anymore. Her face was older, stronger, still beautiful, but it was her eyes that arrested him. They held history, pain, brilliance, and now something new, something hesitant. "Trust." "I never expected you to be this man," she whispered. "I never expected to deserve this chance," he replied. She looked down at the velvet mask in her hand, then back at him. "You still have a lot to answer for." "I know." But tonight, her voice faltered, then found its strength again. "You didn't make me feel small." He nodded once, grateful. "Let's not pretend everything is forgiven," she added. "I wouldn't dream of it." "But," she said, slipping the mask into her clutch, "maybe this is the start of something." Hope cracked through his chest like sunlight. "Can I walk you back in?" he asked. Sue smiled, a small one, but real. "You already are." Chapter 9. Rebuilding Foundations. Inside the grand hall, moments later. The night felt like a cocoon, layered with history, filled with threads of old wounds, but somehow softer than before. The music still floated, but it no longer filled the space between them. The moment was theirs alone. Mike walked beside Sue, their steps in sync, but the air between them was charged with unspoken words, each one heavy with their shared past. She had taken off her mask, But he knew there were other layers to uncover: emotional walls, scar tissue from years of hurt, and the lingering weight of who they'd been versus who they were now. They reached the edge of the ballroom, where the lights dimmed slightly and the noise of the celebration seemed to recede. Sue turned to him. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual, though still holding that sharp edge of self-protection. Mike swallowed, heart pounding. It felt like asking for a second chance at something that couldn't be rewritten. "I don't know, but I want to try." She raised an eyebrow, folding her arms across her chest in a way that told him she wasn't going to give in easily. "Try? Try what, Mike?" "I don't know the right words for this," he admitted, his throat tightening. "But I know I hurt you. And I can't change that. I can't go back to the past, but if you'll let me, I'd like to at least try and be someone you don't hate." Sue was quiet, looking at him as if she were assessing him in ways he couldn't possibly understand. "I don't hate you. But what you did, it's not something I can just forget." "I don't want you to forget," he said softly, stepping a little closer, though not too close. He didn't want to push, not yet. "I want to be someone who deserves to be remembered. If you ever think about me again, I want it to be for something better than high school. Better than the jerk I was." She exhaled, her breath shaky, and Mike could see the hesitation in her eyes. It was a fight she was clearly still wrestling with, whether to forgive, whether to allow herself to believe that someone could change, even if that someone had once been the cause of her pain. "You're right. I don't want to forget. I want to remember the woman I've become, and I need to be sure that the man standing in front of me now isn't just some shadow of what he used to be," she said, her gaze steady, searching. "Because I don't have room in my life for anyone who will bring me back to who I was in high school." Mike's heart stung, but he nodded. "I get it. I'm not asking you to let me in just because I'm here. But I want you to know I'm trying to be better." Sue studied him for a moment longer before letting out a soft sigh. "I can see that. But wanting to be better and actually being better are two very different things." Mike smiled, bitter but with a hint of humor. "I'm aware." She paused again, then slowly nodded, her expression softening just a little. I think we both need time. Time to figure out what this," she gestured between them, "even means. To see if there's anything left after all this time." "You're right," he said, relief flooding him at her words. "I'm not rushing you. I'm not asking for everything at once. You just want a chance," Sue finished for him, her voice steady. "Exactly." She looked down for a moment, her fingers tapping nervously against her clutch, the soft rhythm of her movements grounding them both. "I don't know how to do this, Mike. I don't know how to go from hating someone for so long to suddenly seeing them as not an enemy. You weren't just some passing memory for me. What you did stayed. You don't just get to walk into my life and expect me to forgive that." "I know," he said quietly, the weight of her words settling over him like a mantle. "And I wouldn't ask you to. But I'm here, trying to show you that the man I am now wants something better, something real. Not just to fix the past, but to build something from it." Sue met his eyes, and for the first time tonight, there was something tentative in her gaze, something that looked like hope, not hope in him, but hope in herself. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could let go of the past enough to let him prove it. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you," she said, the words soft, but resolute. "But I'll try. I'm willing to try. Because I believe people can change. I have to believe that, or I'd never be able to face my patients and tell them they have a chance." Mike's throat tightened, emotions flooding him all at once. "I won't let you down, Sue. I can't undo the things I've done, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." She held his gaze for a moment, and he could see the inner battle within her. The hesitation, the fear, the possibility of opening up again. Finally, she gave a small nod. I think that's the most honest thing you've said all night. A small, tentative smile spread across his face. It wasn't the triumphant kind of smile he was used to, the one that came with success and approval. No, this was softer. Cautious. Hopeful. Sue glanced at the ballroom doors behind them, where the music still played and the crowd still danced. But it felt different now. This moment, the one they'd just shared, had altered something between them. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to start something new. You still owe me a dance, she said, her tone lighter now. I'll be sure to make it one you don't regret, Mike replied with a half-smile. She raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced, but there was a spark of something else in her eyes now. Something akin to trust. Together, they walked back into the ballroom. Chapter 10. Breaking the Silence. Inside the grand hall, moments later. The ballroom felt warmer now, the shadows softer, the music just a hum in the background. Mike and Sue stood just inside the door, lingering for a moment before they took a step onto the dance floor. Sue was quiet, her eyes distant, but there was an openness in her gaze that hadn't been there before. She wasn't running, and that meant something important. Mike felt the weight of the moment settle over him, pressing down on his chest. This was it, the real conversation. The one they hadn't been able to have all those years ago, when words were weapons and misunderstandings were easier to ignore. He held out his hand, offering the same invitation as before. Shall we? Sue's eyes flickered down to his hand, and for a long moment, she said nothing. She seemed to be weighing something, deciding if it was worth the risk. And then, slowly, her fingers brushed against his. No sudden, fiery grip, just a quiet acceptance. Let's, she said, her voice quiet but steady. They walked to the center of the room, away from the crowd of classmates laughing and chatting. The floor beneath their feet was cool and smooth, but it didn't match the warmth building between them. Sue placed her other hand on his shoulder, and Mike instinctively pulled her closer, though not too close, respectful, tentative, as if testing the boundaries of their new dynamic. I never thought I'd be here, she said, her voice low but cutting through the quiet space. Not like this. Not with you. Mike swallowed hard, his heart thudding against his ribs. I know. I didn't think I'd ever have the chance to fix anything, let alone. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The truth was raw, too fresh, too vulnerable. He was still figuring out how to put it all together. Sue's eyes flicked up to meet his, searching, always searching. You don't think I ever thought about this? About this night? About you? How many times I wondered if you'd even care what happened to me. Her words cut through him like a blade. He flinched, the weight of their shared past settling over him like an anchor. He had been the one to hurt her. He had been the one to make her doubt her worth, to make her believe she was invisible, insignificant. The guilt rushed in familiar, suffocating. I didn't care, he said, his voice rough with shame. Not at first. Not like I should have. Sue's grip on his hand tightened, and for a moment, he thought she might pull away, might step back into the safety of her past anger. But instead, she stayed. She stayed, and she looked at him like she was trying to find the man she could believe in. Then why now, Mike? She asked, her voice laced with something softer. Why come back? Why this, after everything? He looked down, his throat tight. The words came slowly, but they were the truth. Because I was wrong. Because I've spent 10 years trying to run from who I was, but I never fixed anything. I thought time would do it for me. That success would make it all go away. But it didn't. And I couldn't move forward until I faced what I did to you. Sue didn't say anything for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to understand how much of what he was saying was real. You didn't just hurt me, Mike. You hurt a lot of people. You tore people down to make yourself feel powerful. to make yourself feel seen. Mike's chest tightened at her words. He had no defense, no excuse. Not anymore. I know, he said quietly. I wasn't proud of who I was. And I don't have any excuses for it. They moved slowly in the dance, the music swirling around them, but the world felt distant, like it had receded, leaving only the two of them in this space, this moment. You think I don't know what it's like to be invisible? Sue continued, her voice softer now. I've spent most of my life fighting for my voice to be heard. In high school, they didn't see me. They didn't see anyone who wasn't already part of the in crowd. They didn't see the girl who had to fight for every inch of respect. And neither did you. Mike's breath caught in his throat. He had known what he'd done. He'd been cruel. He'd been blind to the quiet strength in front of him. But hearing it from her now, hearing the rawness in her voice, felt like a punch to the gut. I'm sorry, he said again, but this time, it felt like the words carried more weight. I wish I could take it all back. I really do. Sue looked down, her fingers playing with the edge of his tuxedo, the silence between them heavy. You can't take it back, Mike. You can't erase what happened. But... She lifted her eyes to his, and for the first time tonight, there was something that resembled hope in her gaze. But I can choose to move forward. And so can you. Mike's heart thudded in his chest. How do we do that? How do we move forward when the past feels like it's standing right in front of us? Sue exhaled softly. By acknowledging it. By seeing it and then choosing to leave it behind. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. And maybe by accepting that people can change, even if it's hard to believe sometimes. Mike nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Not yet, anyway. But I'm asking for the chance to prove that I've changed. Sue smiled faintly. It wasn't the kind of smile that promised instant peace, but it was a beginning. A possibility. I think, she said, her voice quiet but steady, that's all anyone can ask for. They danced in silence for a few moments, the music a soft backdrop to the raw honesty hanging between them. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And for the first time in 10 years, Mike felt like he might have a chance to rebuild what he'd destroyed. Chapter 11. First Steps. After the dance, a quiet moment. The dance had ended, but the ballroom still buzzed with energy as guests chatted, laughed, and mingled. The air was lighter now, lighter for Sue, anyway, having shared that fragile, difficult conversation with Mike. Though her heart still felt a little heavier, there was a quiet relief in her chest, as though something had shifted, just a little. Mike, too, seemed a little less burdened. The tension in his shoulders had eased, though his eyes still held the weight of everything he had said, everything he had tried to fix. They moved off the dance floor, retreating to a quieter corner of the hall. Guests continued to swirl around them, but for Sue and Mike, it felt like they were in their own world, apart from the laughter and the noise, from the years of hurt and misunderstanding. Sue leaned against the wall, her arms folded across her chest, a small frown tugging at the corner of her lips. She wanted to feel light. She wanted to feel the thrill of the dance and the glimmer of something new between them. But it wasn't that easy. Not yet. Mike stood next to her, a couple of feet away, but the distance felt more like a chasm. He didn't know how to close the gap between them, or if he even had the right to. He glanced at her and hesitated, before finally speaking. I know it's not enough, he said quietly. I know I'm not enough, not yet. I don't know how to fix it all, but I want to. Sue turned her head, meeting his eyes. There was no anger in her gaze anymore. Only something softer, something more vulnerable. But still, she couldn't allow herself to let go of the past completely. You can't fix everything, she said, her voice steady. But you can try. And that's what matters, Mike. He took a step closer, his heart hammering in his chest. And if trying isn't enough? She took a breath, looking at the ground for a moment before meeting his eyes again. Then I guess we'll know. The raw honesty in her words made him pause, her willingness to face what was uncertain, to take a risk with someone who had hurt her, filled him with a mix of awe and gratitude. Thank you, he said, his voice thick, for giving me the chance to try. Sue's lips curved into a faint smile, but it wasn't the smile of someone who had forgiven him. It was the smile of someone who saw a glimmer of hope, who understood that the journey had only just begun. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, she replied, her fingers nervously toying with the edge of her dress. But we've spent 10 years avoiding this, Mike. Avoiding what was really going on between us. The truth. The hurt. And I think we can't keep avoiding it. Mike nodded. He wasn't asking her to let go of her pain just yet, but there was something in her eyes now that gave him hope. She wasn't holding on to the anger anymore. She was willing to move forward, even if it meant baby steps. Do you think? He began slowly, then stopped himself. What was he asking? How could he possibly expect her to answer that question? Do you think we could try? I mean, if you're open to it. Sue raised an eyebrow, her gaze shifting from curious to guarded. Try what? Mike swallowed, his heart pounding in his chest. Try this. Whatever this is. A second chance. I don't know if it's a chance at something more, or just the chance to start over, but I don't want to leave tonight without knowing if there's even the possibility. Sue's face softened at his words, her hand instinctively reaching up to run through her hair. It was the smallest of gestures, but it told him everything he needed to know. She was still unsure, still scared, but she wasn't dismissing him, either. I don't know if I'm ready for something more, she said carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. But maybe we could talk. Really talk. No masks, no walls. Just two people figuring out what they've missed all these years. A wave of relief washed over him. She wasn't shutting him out. She wasn't pushing him away. And that was enough for now. I'd like that, he said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. I'd like to take the time to figure this out. To figure us out. Sue nodded slowly. It's going to take time, Mike. But I'm willing to try. For once, I'm willing to believe that maybe, just maybe, you can be the person you say you are now. I won't let you down, he promised, his voice firm, though his heart was still racing. I'll show you. I'll prove it. For the first time that night, Sue smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. It wasn't the smile of someone who had forgiven him completely, but it was the smile of someone who had opened the door just a little wider. Someone who had allowed the possibility of something better to take root. I'm not asking for perfection, she said softly. I'm asking for honesty. For you to be real. With me. With yourself. I can do that, Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. That's all I want. To be real. They stood there, in that quiet corner of the hall, sharing a moment of understanding that neither had expected. There were no grand declarations, no promises of forever. But there was something real. Something that felt like a beginning. Sue took a deep breath, glancing toward the door where the music still swirled, the world outside still moving at its own pace. But in that moment, everything slowed. Everything narrowed down to the two of them, standing at the threshold of something new. You ready? Mike asked, his voice tentative but hopeful. Sue nodded. Yeah, let's see where this goes. Together, they stepped into the light, back into the chaos of the reunion, but with a different understanding between them. A new kind of connection. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was a start. And that was enough. I would like to take a moment away from the story. If you like my short stories, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas for my next storyline, please be sure to share it in the comments. Now back to the story. Chapter 12. Unmasking the Past. The following week, a quiet cafe near Sue's hospital. The cafe was small but cozy, tucked away from the noise of the city. It had an old-world charm with worn wooden tables and mismatched chairs that gave it a homely feel. The hum of quiet chatter and the clink of coffee cups filled the air, but it was the calm between Mike and Sue that filled the space between them. It had been a week since the alumni ball. A week since that moment they shared on the dance floor, awkward, painful, and oddly healing. Mike had called Sue a few times since, and they had spoken briefly about meeting up. Nothing serious. Just a chance to catch up. To continue the conversation they had started, but couldn't finish. Sue was early, as always. She sat at a small table in the corner by the window, looking out at the rain trickling down the glass, her expression thoughtful, distant. She was dressed casually, simple, no makeup, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked at peace in a way Mike had never seen her before. In high school, she had always been the quiet girl who sat in the back of the room, blending in, never the center of attention. But now, there was a strength about her. A quiet power that had nothing to do with her profession or the accolades she had earned over the years. It came from something deeper. Something earned from years of struggling to be seen and, ultimately, choosing to see herself. Mike stepped into the cafe, scanning the room for her. His heart did that familiar flutter when he saw her, as it had at the ball, and then again when they'd first reconnected. She was the same, and yet so different. He had spent so much time trying to bury the past, pretending it didn't matter. But it was all coming to light now, bit by bit, word by word. And each time they spoke, he realized that he wasn't just confronting his own past. He was confronting theirs. A past that belonged to both of them, shaped by the decisions they had made and the things they had failed to say. Sue glanced up when she saw him. There was no surprise in her eyes, just a quiet recognition. She gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "Hey," Mike said as he slid into the chair, a half smile on his lips. "I hope I'm not too late." Sue shook her head, pushing her coffee cup aside. "No, you're fine. I'm always early. It's a bad habit." Mike chuckled, a nervous energy in his voice. He was still getting used to the idea that they were doing this, talking, meeting up, opening up. It felt like walking on a tightrope, and every word was a careful step. "I've been thinking about what you said last week," he began, settling into the chair and rubbing his hands together. "About moving forward. And you're right. I can't keep holding on to the past. I need to figure out how to let it go." But the truth is, he paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know if I'm ready to move forward. Not until I understand it all. Understand us." Sue tilted her head slightly, her eyes searching his face, as if trying to decipher what he meant. "What do you mean by understand us?" "I mean, I spent so long trying to bury the guilt, trying to move past everything I did to you and everyone else in high school," Mike said, his voice dropping to a softer tone. "But I can't. I can't move forward with you unless I understand why I did the things I did. And why you, of all people, ended up being the one I hurt the most." Sue's gaze didn't falter. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Mike, I've had a lot of time to think about this too. It's not just about you. It's about me. About what I let happen. What I let you get away with. And then, what I let myself get away with." Mike furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Sue took a deep breath. "I let myself believe that I didn't deserve more. That I didn't deserve respect. That I was invisible, so it didn't matter what you or anyone else did to me." Mike's heart sank as he heard the words fall from her lips. The shame he had carried for so long, the shame of being the one who hurt her, felt sharper now. He had never really understood the depth of the damage he had caused. Not until now. "You were never invisible," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. I was just too blind to see it. Sue gave a small, wry smile. Maybe I was invisible, but I didn't let it define me. Not anymore. Mike leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. And that's why you're so damn strong. Because you didn't let me, or anyone else, keep you down. I can't even imagine what it took to get to where you are. Sue shifted in her seat, her expression unreadable for a moment. It wasn't just about strength, Mike. It was about survival. You weren't the only one who needed to survive high school. I needed to get through it without losing myself. Without losing my voice. The weight of her words landed heavily on Mike. He hadn't considered it that way before. He had always seen Sue as the quiet girl who was strong in her own way, but he never realized just how much of a struggle it had been for her to find that strength. I guess I never gave you credit for that, Mike admitted. I was too busy being wrapped up in my own crap to see what you were going through. Sue nodded slowly, her gaze softening. We were both just kids, Mike. Kids who didn't know how to deal with the pain. I didn't know how to tell you to stop. I didn't know how to stand up for myself. And you, she paused, looking down at the table. You didn't know how much damage you were doing because you were too busy trying to fit in. Too busy building up the walls around yourself. Mike felt a lump form in his throat. It wasn't easy to hear, but it was real. And for the first time, he understood that his actions hadn't just hurt Sue. They had hurt both of them. And maybe, just maybe, they could start fixing it together. So, what now? He asked, his voice hoarse. What happens next? Sue met his gaze, her eyes calm but filled with something new, something hopeful. We keep talking. We keep trying. But this time, we do it honestly. No more pretending. Mike nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle over him. There was no quick fix. No magic answer. But this was something he could do. They could do. It was a beginning. A chance to rewrite the narrative they had been living for the last decade. And maybe, just maybe, they could find something real. Chapter 13. Breaking Down the Walls. 2 weeks later, Sue's apartment. Late evening. The soft hum of the city below filtered in through the open window, the occasional sound of distant traffic mingling with the chirp of crickets. Inside the apartment, it was quiet, still. Sue stood by the window, looking out at the view. She didn't feel the need to rush anymore. Not tonight. Not after everything they had shared in the past few weeks. Mike had called earlier, asking if he could come over. It wasn't a big deal, nothing monumental. Just another step in the slow process of learning to trust again. Of learning to see each other, not just for the people they had been in high school, but for who they were now. The people they were trying to become. The knock on the door pulled Sue from her thoughts, and she walked across the room to answer it. When she opened the door, Mike stood there, his hand poised to knock again, a sheepish grin on his face. You're late, she teased lightly, stepping aside to let him in. Sorry. Traffic, he said, his voice light but carrying a layer of tension beneath it. It had been 2 weeks since they had their last real conversation, since they had begun to explore the cracks in their old walls, and yet, things still felt tentative. Raw. Mike stepped into the apartment, a familiar feeling of unease creeping up on him. Not because of Sue, but because of what this moment represented. They had crossed a line, reached a turning point, but there was still so much unknown between them. So much to figure out. Sue led him to the couch, where they both sat down, a slight distance between them. She was wearing a loose sweater, her hair pulled back, and she seemed so at ease. And yet, Mike could feel the quiet intensity of the space they shared. It was comfortable, but not without its edges. So, Sue began, folding her legs beneath her. What's on your mind? Mike stared at her for a long moment, feeling the weight of the question. He had spent days trying to prepare for this conversation, trying to figure out how to say the things he had never said before. How to truly break through the barriers they had spent years building. Everything, he finally said. Honestly, Sue, I've been thinking about a lot of things. About what I did to you back then. About how I hurt you. About what I was really running from. Sue didn't say anything at first, just watched him carefully. There was no judgment in her eyes, just quiet curiosity, as though she was waiting for him to peel back the layers. I think I always thought that if I could be perfect, if I could be the guy everyone admired, the one with the best grades, the best future, that I'd be able to forget everything I hated about myself. And that meant I had to keep people like you in their place, Mike continued, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. I thought I had it all figured out. That I was better than you. And you, God, you were so smart. So different. You weren't trying to fit in, and I hated that. I hated it because it reminded me that I wasn't enough. Sue's breath caught in her throat, the vulnerability in his words leaving her momentarily speechless. She had always known that Mike's actions had come from insecurity, but hearing him admit it so openly was something else entirely. It shook her deeply. Mike, I'm sorry, he interrupted, his hands running through his hair. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but I can't keep pretending that it was just high school drama. I need you to understand. I need you to see that I'm not that guy anymore. I can't be him anymore. Sue leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering as she looked at him. And I need you to know, Mike, that I'm not the same person either. I spent years thinking I was weak because of what you did to me. I let your words get inside my head, and I believed them, but not anymore. I had to fight to believe I'm worth something. I had to fight to trust myself again. Mike's heart clenched at her words, the depth of her pain hitting him like a punch to the gut. She had suffered because of him. And yet, there she was, sitting in front of him, stronger than he had ever known her to be. She wasn't broken. She was whole. I'm sorry, he whispered again. I can't take back what I did, but I can show you that I'm not that person anymore. That I've changed. Sue met his eyes, her expression softening as she considered his words. There was still caution in her gaze, still that distance, but something else too, something like acceptance. The kind of acceptance that came with time and with the realization that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about acknowledging the pain and choosing to move forward despite it. I know you've changed, Mike, she said quietly. But it's not just about what you've done. It's about who you are now. About whether you're willing to be real. To be honest with me. With yourself. Mike nodded, his voice thick. I'm trying. I know I've messed up. But I don't want to hide from it anymore. I want to be someone you can trust. Sue studied him for a long moment before finally speaking, her voice just above a whisper. And I want to trust you. But it's going to take time. He leaned in slightly, his eyes full of earnestness. I'll wait. As long as it takes. I just need you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Sue's eyes softened as she looked at him, her breath steady, but a hint of vulnerability flickering in her gaze. She had spent so many years protecting herself, putting up walls, pretending she didn't need anyone. But now, with Mike sitting in front of her, offering his honesty, his pain, his willingness to try, she felt something shift. Not in the grand way she had imagined. Not with fireworks or grand gestures. But in the quiet, real way that meant they were both finally seeing each other. You don't have to be perfect, Mike, Sue said, her voice low but certain. I just need you to be real. I can do that, Mike replied, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. They sat there in silence for a moment, neither of them needing to fill the space with words. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet understanding that this was only the beginning. And for the first time in a long time, both of them believed in the possibility of something more. Chapter 14. Building something new. 2 weeks later, Mike's office, late afternoon. The glass walls of Mike's office overlooked the city skyline, the golden light of the setting sun casting a warm glow across the room. Despite the breathtaking view, Mike wasn't looking out the window. His focus was on the document in front of him, the figures and charts blurring as his mind drifted. He hadn't been able to concentrate much lately. Not with the constant pull of thoughts of Sue. Not with the weight of everything he had said and done over the past few weeks. It was a strange feeling realizing that the life he had built, the success, the achievements, the admiration, was nothing without someone to share it with. But what was harder to grasp was the truth. He wasn't just trying to build a future with Sue. He was trying to rebuild themselves, their relationship, their trust, and the way they had once seen each other. The knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, trying to smooth out the nervousness in his voice. He wasn't used to this. To opening up. The door swung open, and Sue stepped in, her presence filling the space without a word. She was dressed in a sharp black coat over a blouse, her hair loosely curled around her shoulders. Her usual calm demeanor was there, but today there was a spark in her eyes. She was here for something more than just a casual meeting. "I didn't expect you to be here," Mike said, standing up from his desk. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "I thought you'd be working late at the hospital again." Sue gave him a smile, one that was almost secretive, before sitting down. "I finished early today. Thought I'd drop by. Is that okay?" Mike hesitated, unsure of what was happening, but the smile that tugged at the corners of Sue's lips put him at ease. There was something new between them now, a shared understanding that wasn't there before. A gentleness that came with the knowing of each other's scars and the willingness to face them together. "Of course," Mike said, walking around the desk to join her. "So, what's on your mind?" Sue folded her arms, her gaze thoughtful. "You said something to me last week that stuck with me. You said you were trying to be real, and that you didn't want to hide anymore. I've been thinking about that a lot. About what it means to be real, and how I've spent so much of my life pretending to be someone I wasn't. Someone strong. Someone who didn't need anything from anyone." Mike watched her closely. "You don't have to pretend with me, Sue." "I know," she said, her voice steady, but there was an edge to it now, something determined. "But I think the person I need to stop pretending with the most is myself." Mike felt a flutter in his chest. This was different. This wasn't about the past anymore. This was about now. About moving forward. About creating something new. "Then what are you going to do about it?" he asked, leaning against the edge of his desk. His voice was low, sincere. Sue's gaze shifted, and Mike could almost see the wheels turning in her mind. "I'm still figuring that out. But I think part of it is learning how to let go. To not carry the weight of everything that happened with us. With me." Mike swallowed, unsure of what to say next. He had been so focused on his own journey of redemption, on fixing the things he had broken, that he hadn't truly asked Sue what she needed to heal. He realized now that he had been too quick to think about his own guilt and not about her experience. Her journey. "I know I can't fix everything," he said, stepping closer to her, his voice earnest. "But I want to help you, if you'll let me." Sue's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. She was searching him, as if looking for some proof of his sincerity, his willingness to be something different. "I want to believe you," she said quietly. "But I don't know how to let go of all the things I've been holding on to." Mike sat down next to her, close enough that the air between them seemed charged, but not too close. They were still navigating this new dynamic. Still learning what it meant to be them again, after everything. "I get that," he said, his voice low. "But maybe letting go doesn't mean forgetting. Maybe it just means letting go of the idea that it's all on us to fix everything. We're not perfect. But we don't have to carry this alone either." Sue let out a breath, looking at him, and for the first time, Mike saw a flicker of something else, something deeper in her expression. A quiet acceptance. Maybe not complete forgiveness yet, but the seed of it. The possibility that something real could grow between them, despite everything. "What do you want, Mike?" she asked, her voice steady, but there was a softness in her words that hadn't been there before. Mike exhaled, running a hand through his hair as he thought carefully about his response. "I want to see you. Really see you, Sue. Not as the quiet girl from high school. Not as the person I hurt. But as the woman you are now. The one who's spent years learning to be herself. And I want to learn how to be the kind of man who can deserve that." Sue's eyes softened even further, and there was something like understanding between them. "I'm not sure I deserve you either, Mike," she said with a small smile. "But I think we're both figuring that out." Mike smiled, the weight of the conversation still heavy, but in a different way. There was still so much to learn, so many layers to peel back, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. The path toward something new. Something real. "I guess we'll find out," he said softly. "Together." Sue nodded, her eyes steady on his. Together. Chapter 15. Embracing the Future. 1 month later, Sue's apartment, evening. The moonlight streamed softly through the blinds, casting gentle shadows across the room. The city outside buzzed with life, but within the apartment, there was only quiet. A comfortable quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled with words, but that still hummed with a sense of connection. Sue sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea cradled between her hands, staring out into the night. She had grown accustomed to the stillness, to moments of reflection. But tonight, her thoughts weren't clouded by the uncertainties that had once filled her mind. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. Not complete, not yet, but a sense that something real was beginning to take root. Something new. The sound of a knock at the door broke her thoughts, and she stood up, crossing the room to answer. She knew exactly who it was. When she opened the door, Mike stood there, a warm smile on his face and a small bouquet of flowers in his hand. The gesture was simple, but it felt meaningful. He had become more thoughtful in ways that surprised her, and in ways that made her heart stir in ways she hadn't expected. "Hey," he greeted, his voice gentle, as if careful not to disturb the calm of the moment. "I brought you something." Sue's smile deepened as she took the flowers from him, inhaling their sweet fragrance. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to," Mike replied, his tone soft but sincere. "Is this a bad time?" "No," she said quickly, stepping aside to let him in. "It's never a bad time." He followed her into the apartment, and the air between them was light, familiar now. They were no longer treading the water of their past. They had long since broken the surface and were learning how to swim together, with all the vulnerability that came with it. "Do you want some tea?" Sue asked as she walked back to the kitchen, carefully setting the flowers in a vase. "Sure," Mike replied, sitting at the table. "I'm not in a rush, Sue. Just here to spend some time with you. I'm not looking for any big talks or revelations tonight." Sue paused for a moment, feeling the honesty in his words. There was no pressure, just the simple desire to be in each other's company, to be comfortable in the presence of someone who had seen you at your worst and yet was still willing to stick around. That was rare. She prepared the tea in silence, her movements calm and deliberate. The warmth of the moment settled in, and she could feel the space between them shrinking, no longer filled with unspoken tensions. It wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. It was about choosing each other every day, even when the past still lurked in the corners. She handed him a cup of tea and sat across from him at the table. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she said, her voice steady but filled with meaning. Mike raised an eyebrow, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "I was wondering when you were going to say that." Sue couldn't help but laugh softly. "It's hard not to think about what's been happening between us. We've been through a lot. And honestly, it feels strange sometimes how easily we've fallen into this new thing." "This new thing," Mike repeated with a grin. "Are you sure that's what we're calling it? I thought we were something more than that." Sue tilted her head, her smile mischievous. Okay, maybe we're not just a new thing. But it's still strange, you know? To be real with each other. To be honest. To not have all these walls up. Mike looked at her for a long moment, the seriousness of his gaze shifting into something more vulnerable. I know what you mean. It hasn't been easy, but I don't want to rush this. I don't want to fall into old patterns. I want us to build something different this time. Something lasting. Sue studied him, her heart fluttering at the sincerity in his voice. She had never imagined herself being here, sitting across from the Mike she once knew, the Mike who had once tormented her, made her doubt herself, question her worth. And yet here he was, not the arrogant high school version of him, but the man who had faced his past and was trying to rebuild something meaningful. I'm not perfect either, Sue said softly, her eyes meeting his. I still have my walls, my doubts. I still don't know if I can just let go of everything I've been holding on to. You don't have to let go of everything all at once, Mike said gently. We'll take it one step at a time. We'll figure it out as we go. Sue nodded, her fingers curling around the warm cup in her hands. It's strange, though, isn't it? How easily we slip into the roles we used to play in high school. I don't want to be that girl who was afraid of you. I don't want to be the one who's still carrying around that weight. Mike reached out and placed a hand over hers, his touch warm and reassuring. You don't have to be that girl anymore, Sue. We both have a chance to be someone new. Her eyes searched his, looking for something, confirmation, maybe. But she found it in the sincerity of his gaze, the vulnerability in his words. Do you think we can really make it work? After everything, she asked quietly. Mike squeezed her hand gently, his voice filled with conviction. I do. I think we can. As long as we keep being honest with each other. As long as we keep choosing to face the past, but not let it define us. Sue took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling as she processed his words. There was something about the certainty in his voice, something that felt steady and unshakable. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. We'll have to work through things, she said, her voice soft but filled with a quiet determination. But I think we can. Mike smiled, his eyes lighting up with something like relief. Then let's take it slow. One step at a time. Together. Sue returned his smile, the weight of her past no longer holding her back. They were no longer bound by the pain and shame of who they had been. They were creating something new, something real. And for the first time in years, she believed that they could make it work. Together. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe for more short stories.